Hi, everybody. I like to say the happiest of holidays to everyone. I apologize for being late in posting videos to my Patreon community. Um, I have had a lot going on. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, or scampered over to my show, All Things Writing, which is a podcast show, and I actually like 2,500 downloads. So I've got quite a few listeners out there, and one of the things I've been doing is recording A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I wanted to do that last year, but I kind of ran out of time. So that was a small problem. So now I am making up for a little bit of lost time here. The next chapter of Riapoke is what I'm going to read for you today. Again, I'm sorry it took me so long to get around to it. But without further ado, let's get to the next chapter. You're going to hear my brother is texting me in the background, so you might hear that a few times as we go on. This is chapter 15. It's entitled Breaking and Entering. As Wayland's blood continued to trickle from his body, his speech became more and more random and nonsensical. Wayland continued talking about the hellish nightmare of the town's existence. He spoke at length about the whole thing being run by the town's reverend and something called the Master. In his few moments of clarity, Wayland strongly advised against going into town. Although the warning was stern enough, Mike had his doubts of the ailing man's reliability. Wayland had heard of Megan and Kyle, or Wayland hadn't heard of Megan and Kyle. Bill helped fill in the gaps in Wayland's memory from his visit to Riapoke many years ago. Wayland suggested the police station was the most logical place to check. If they weren't there, the town's only church might be the next best place to look. He speculated that the appearance of Megan and her son would be connected to his experience on the lake and the discovery of the severed head. Bill dismissed a lot of this as the ravings of a man whose life was slipping away. According to local legend, Wayland said, the body entombed in the lake, or a body entombed in the lake would remain at the bottom. If a corpse resurfaced, it was an ominous sign signaling catastrophic change. Every Riapoke resident had been trained to seek out these signs and report them. Bill woke up Mike around 3 a.m. Wayland's situation had gone from bad to worse, as his breathing became labored and ragged. 15 minutes later, Wayland took in one final strained breath and let it out in a long, slow sigh. Wayland Anderson passed into whatever version of an afterlife awaited him. Mike managed somehow to sleep after Wayland passed away. He woke, surprised to see the sun's rays piercing the tree line. The night before was difficult for all of them. At first, he and Bill considered leaving the body at the impromptu camp. However, as Bill pointed out, the conservation officer might notice if his friend's body went missing. Their search for Megan and Kyle could become infinitely more difficult if the entire town were suddenly hunting for them. Neither relished the idea of going back to that place. In the early morning light, they fashioned a small stretcher. It was easier to carry Wayland's body this way than trying to carry the dead weight back to the slaughterhouse. Even so, the task still took 20 grueling minutes. A small bead of blood leaked off the end of the tarp they'd repurposed as a stretcher. It stood out as an ominous sign of things to come. Mike knew turning back no longer presented an option. If even part of what Wayland had said was true, they were running out of time. Finding Megan and Kyle was their top priority. Silly, though, as I barely knew the woman, Mike thought. Mike felt compelled to save her, as if his life directed the chance, or as if life, as if his wife directed the chance meeting, and even now drove him to do all he could to rescue this woman and her son. How should we leave the body? Bill asked. Mike looked puzzled. What do you mean? Well, we can't just dump the body randomly. We need to make sure we leave him exactly as we found him. Then again, I don't know how often people come out here anymore. Mike gave Bill a quizzical look. You've been here before. It seemed Bill's comment came from a place of surprising familiarity. That's not what I meant. Based on the piles of garbage laying around, I'm guessing people don't come out here too often. Even so, we should cover our tracks as well as we can. Bill's logic was sound. Trying to remember exactly how they'd found Wayland proved difficult. Trying to view the memories of the day before through the stress-stained lens of recent events, neither one of them remembered what position they found the unfortunate man in, so they reached a compromise based on their best recollections. Leaving Wayland just laying there felt wrong. However, the choices at this point were limited. They dumped the makeshift stretcher into an old root cellar under the house, which looked unused for many years. Heading back toward town, they tried to heading back. Let me try that again. Heading back toward town, they tried to find a fresh set of clothes to change into, perhaps from someone's clothesline. Mike doubted anyone would simply wave hello and then ignore two blood-covered strangers walking through the center of town. They kept to the woods as much as possible, only peering into clearings at the homes and businesses in the distance. Their attempts to wash the blood from their clothes proved futile, as they were soiled past the point simple water stood any chance of cleaning them. Mike thought about their next moves. Walking into town would likely result in them ending up like Whalen, or worse. The dead man suggested to check the police station sounded like their best plan of action. Failing that, checking the church offered the second best destination. The downside of the plan was that in either place they would stand out like sore thumbs. They had to wait and slip into those places when they knew no one would be around. Mike remembered his ethics class from law school and one case where a lawyer bent the rules a bit to win a case. The situation far surpassed a simple this situation far surpassed the simple bending of the rule and ventured into a course of action likely to get him disbarred. However, lives hung in the balance and time was slipping away. Mike could always justify his actions after he saved Megan and Kyle. They needed a good vantage point to watch over the police station until they could be sure the building was clear of people for the night. Mike wished Whalen talked a little longer. Details like how many police officers were in the town suddenly took on extreme importance. Would they have to avoid 1, 2, 50? They had no way of knowing. Approaching an opening in the woodline, they spied an abandoned storefront, an old clothier with a sign reading closed. The dark and dirty windows and the rotting wooden sign out front gave the welcome impression that it had been for many years since the sign on the door last read open. Bill looked at Mike. Sad, the plight of small-town cults in America. The economy must not be doing so hot. Although the joke was a little flat, Mike chuckled nervously. Do you think there's an alarm system on that building? Doubt it, said, shaking his head. It looks like that place hasn't been touched in a while. The windows don't even look like they have sensors on them. Should be easy enough to get inside, but I have to ask you, are you prepared to do this? Bill, after everything we've seen and heard, why would you even ask me that? Just checking, Bill answered. This road looks pretty deserted. We can just run across it and hope no one notices. You go first. Make for the alleyway and hide behind something. Once you are safely away and I don't hear an angry mob coming after you, I'll go next. Gee, thanks, Bill. You're all heart, Mike said flatly. Mike stared down both directions of the roadway for any signs of life. Thankfully, the road remained clear. A simple two-lane highway. To him, it might as well have been the width of a football field. Once he broke cover, there was no turning back. If anyone spotted them, it would spell the end. Dredging up as much courage as possible, Mike took the first steps onto the pavement. Legs, knees, and feet worked against him as cramps sprang up in both of his calves, propelling his tired body forward. Mike risked a brief glance to the left to see a pair of headlights turn onto the roadway, coming toward him. Still, after a half-mile away, depending on the speed, that distance would quickly be eclipsed. It didn't even feel like himself disappearing into the darkened shadows being cast across the alleyway next to the building. The image played out in his mind as a film based on his life. Ducking behind a row of garbage cans, he scanned the rest of the alley for movement. The area looked clear enough, except for a cat looking for dinner. Down the alley in the street, a flash of color caught his attention as the car drove by at an alarmingly slow speed, or maybe it was just his overtaxed imagination. Someone, sitting behind the wheel, talked on a cell phone. They didn't seem to have spotted him. Mike let out a sigh of relief. They'd gotten lucky. Waiting behind a cluster of metal garbage cans for what seemed like hours, several cars and trucks crossed in front of him in both directions. No sign of Bill, indicating he'd either been delayed by vehicles crossing the road or worse, spotted by one of them. Hoping hoping to hell no one grabbed the older, slower man, Mike felt the oppressive weight of going it alone if Bill were out of the equation. Bill provided his direction and his only link to the outside world if their plan went south. The distinction, the distinct possibility of leaving Kelly without her remaining parent loomed in front of him. A cold reality gripped him. Bill's words rang true. They shouldn't have come. Mike wondered what his daughter was thinking right now, likely worried because Dad had gone missing the night before and hadn't come home, as expected. How did they let this situation get so out of control? Perhaps his worry about Megan overrode his common sense. Concern for a woman he barely knew may have put him in mortal danger. Mike's heart rate climbed to an unhealthy level as time ticked away and Bill failed to appear in the alley. Older or not, it shouldn't have taken him this long to cross the street. Was this all a huge mistake? If it was, it had the potential for making him pay with his life. Worse yet, he gambled with Megan and Kyle, and now Bill's life as well. 2 more cars drove by. Mike concluded that something went terribly wrong. Bill must have been captured. Creeping back up the alley and glancing out across the street, the woods showed no signs of the burly former seaman. While possible, the older man still waited out there. The road stood clear of vehicles. Nothing should keep him to the road. Mike returned to the back of the store. There was only one thing to do at this point. He would have to press on alone. Prying off a badly worn piece of plywood covering a broken store window, he climbed inside. Time to reformulate the plan. The reality of having 3 people to rescue set in. The store sat as empty as Bill figured it would be. It reeked of dust and disuse. He made a quick search of the place, finding an old shirt with the store's logo on it. He sighed in relief as he changed out of his bloody undershirt. Thank heavens for small victories, he thought. The floor of the store looked like a marketing firm had installed the floor as flyers and newspaper ads littered the entire place. Based on the dates of the newspapers, the place had been closed for at least 10 years. Many of the ads, he noticed, were for a tent revival led by one Reverend Swenson. On the counter, next to an old cash register, lay a small receipt book, a yellow pages, a small pencil, dutifully waiting for some business that never came. Flipping open the antiquated phone book, a relic from a time before smartphones automatically found the phone number of any business, Mike found an old city map showing the layout of a younger version of Riapoke. Although browned and brittle, discolored from a water leak, the streets and major landmarks were clearly legible. A blue badge symbol marked the location of the police station. Similarly, a cross depicted the location of the local church. He tore the map out and put it in his pocket. Now armed with a cleaner shirt and an old map of the town, Mike steeled himself for what came next. It was time to find Bill, Megan, and Kyle. So that was chapter 15 of my book, Riapoke. I will get chapter 16 in the records soon enough so that you guys get that next chapter. Thank you for joining me. Remember, if you like what I'm doing, please share this with your friends so that they too can become Patreons and listen to the chapters as well. Share the love. So anyway, everybody have a wonderful day. And in case I don't hear from anybody before now and then, have a happy holidays. Bye-bye.